G'day everyone and welcome back. Today we are going to be moving on to something a little bit different. We are finally going to start looking at some other things in the dimensional hall. However, before we move into that, there is something really important that you guys need to do first, which I'm going to talk about right now. Inside the craft building, if you go to the building tab, there's going to be a lot of these statues and other things that you can build, and some of them are actually quite important to focus on. The first statue is going to be the Ancient Guardian of Ellunia, and this one is going to give you Dimensional Hole Energy Charge Rate plus 10%. The other statue is the Ancient Guardian of Khalderun. Now, so what you're going to want to be doing then is we want to go and clear each of these dungeons at level 5 so we can unlock these and craft these two buildings. So knowing this, you are going to want to go into Ellunia and you're going to want to build a B5 team for the Sanctuary of Dreaming Fairies, and also for the Khalderun, you're going to want to build a B5 team for the Ruin of Silent Death. We have actually already been farming the Sanctuary of Dreaming Fairies for the past week, and let's go through the team that I'm using to clear it right now. As of right now, our team consists of Roid, 2A, Riley, Wind Homunculus, and Naomi. If you really wanted to, there are some changes you could potentially make. It's not really going to affect the consistency. It might change the speed a little bit, but I don't think it's super important. But you could drop the Wind Homunculus for something like Seal. The other unit you could potentially use is Bernard 2A. When I made a series about 2 years ago, the team that I did actually use was using Bernard 2A in the leader skill position, and this team was perfectly safe. As you can see right here, the Roid is on a Violent Broken set. We have him on Speed, HP, with a kind of a little bit of a focus on accuracy as well as HP percent. It is very important that he does land his Defense Break, Attack Break, and Provoke, as this is going to increase the safety of the team. For artifacts, it's not super important for him as he will most likely survive all the way to the end in every single run, but I do just have him on some random HP on both sides just to ensure that he has a bit more stats. For Riley as well, she is also on a Via Broken build, Speed, HP. The left side artifact is mostly focusing on minus fire damage, and on the right side artifact, I was pretty much just looking for S3 recovery, or maybe even S4 recovery would be good as well. I do think it's important to get about 120 speed on her. This is a pretty good spot, and it also allows us to get quite a consistent amount of healing to ensure that our team is always topped up. For our Wind Homunculus, it is still using the runes that we currently use for the Giant's Abyss team. It is on a Fatal Blade set, attack, crit damage, and attack. This rune, I think I got a day or two ago, absolutely fantastic upgrade. We're just going to put some crit damage on this, and this one is perfect. You're not going to change any of the artifacts on this unit, as the boss is also water, so damage dealt on water is going to give us a huge boost to our overall damage, and on right side, you're still focusing on any crit damage lines just to increase the damage output. One of the huge tips I actually do recommend for ensuring that your team is safe and consistent is making sure your Naomi is a little bit tankier. Unlike the Homunculus, she doesn't have a second life, so she can't come back. This unit will need to just be tanky enough to survive any kind of bad RNG. So these are the stats that I decided to go with. She's on pretty much fully broken. We have only one blade set, and she is on attack, crit damage, attack. And she's getting a decent amount of crit damage now. We've been farming for a bit, and 234 is not bad for 30 days in. For artifacts, unfortunately, I don't have anything good for the left side, but once again, I would probably focus on damage dealt on water or crit damage lines. And then on the right side, you're doing the same thing. You're going to focus on crit damage lines. So let's start up a run, as there is something we do need to talk about, which is the turn order. Something that you will have to do, because this team will probably not be consistent unless you have this exactly set up. If you go into the boss battle for phase 1, you want to be targeting the left minion into the boss. The Shamann getting a attack buff could potentially kill one of your other units, probably even the Wind Homunculus. If you really wanted to make your Wind Homunculus tankier just to ensure that this is more safe, you can do that. However, I just kill the Shamann and then move on. For phase 2, we really have to get this Provoke or Defense Break down onto the Bellinus. If the Bellinus gets a turn, then we might actually wipe. So this is one of the other things you must do. And then the last thing is you need to focus the Fran on the third phase. Just because if the attack buff or immunity gets onto the boss, we can potentially also wipe. So this is the best setup for this team currently. Later on, when you get stronger, you're probably just going to be able to go straight boss for all 3 waves, and your team will probably run half the time that I'm running for this one right here. As of right now, this team is super consistent. As you can see here, we got a 228 time on this one. It does average out to about a 210 to 215. As you can see, the fastest time was even down to 139. This team is very consistent. If you do want to make it slightly more consistent, you're probably better off maybe getting the Bernard or the Seal in, as I talked about previously, as this will just give a little bit more control onto the Belinus in Wave 2, who does seem to be the biggest problem for a single fail. Let's have a look at the team we're going to be using for Khalderun level 5. The first unit we've got is the Verdehile, who is also the leader skill. We have him on a HP, crit damage, attack, fatal blade build. You'll notice that we have a decent amount of HP stat on this Verdehile, and the reason being is that on the very first wave, there is a potential that the Verdehile could die if he doesn't have enough hit points. So making him slightly tankier for this one is definitely something I would recommend. The only other thing I would recommend for this is to make sure that he is speed tuned to go last. Moving last is just way more consistent, and it's probably going to be a little bit faster in the long run, so that is definitely something I do advise. For the artifacts, for left side, you can go for damage dealt on Dark, and for right side, you can go for just any crit damage lines. Right now, I haven't really changed any of these, so they're just on random stuff, but feel free to change them depending on what you have on your account. The Riley is on the exact same Vigor broken rune set we had for the Ellunia team, so there are no changes here. Moving on to Shamann. Now, before I move on to the next two units, there are other ways you could make this team work. You could potentially run something like the Ikaru and then a Jultan, which is the dark version of this, and that team would work perfectly well as well. However, I do really like running Shamann in this team because Shamann is probably the best unit to tank the boss. I definitely do recommend building Shamann anyway. For most cases, you're going to use him in your speed team for Necro Abyss. A lot of people use him in TOA Hell to quickly get through the boss stages, and you could potentially use him in Siege. He just seems like a pretty overall decent 2A, so I do recommend building him. For Shamann's runes, we're mostly just focusing on crit damage. We only need about 87 crit rate. Yes, we might miss crits on the waves, but I don't really care about that. His main focus is just dealing damage on the boss. Right now, I think I have him on, HP, crit damage, HP, and then I just don't even have any of these grinded. We just chucked on some random set of runes, and this is perfectly fine. For the left side artifact, as the boss is a dark element, you're definitely going to be looking for damage dealt on dark. We got a really good one here, so this is actually going to help with increasing our damage output on this boss. Just going to make the waves a little bit faster. For the right side, you're just looking for traditional crit damage lines. S2 crit damage, first attack crit damage, single target, or crit damage is more HP. They're all perfectly fine. The last unit is Vigor. I think he is an amazing unit still. I use him in a lot of areas. Mostly these days, I probably only use him in Siege and some TOA Hell stages, but he definitely does have his uses. For his build, we have him on a Vio Blade set. Currently, we got him on speed, crit damage, and HP percent. We do have a really, really good rune that we pulled down in, I think it was episode 5 or 6, and this is heavy carrying him, but once again, later on in the game, once you get slightly better runes, you are going to want to push this to 100% crit rate, and you definitely want to try to get a little bit more HP on this guy as he is a little bit squishy. For the artifacts on left side, I definitely recommend going for damage dealt on dark, and for right side, you have two choices. You could go for S3 accuracy to make sure you land your defense break. Being the only defense breaker, it is quite important that he does land it. The other thing you could potentially do is just go for S2 recovery, just to increase your healing. It's not really going to matter which one you go for, but I would probably prioritize the accuracy over the recovery. For the Khalderun turn order, for phase 1, 2, and 3, you're able to just go straight boss for all of these, and the team should be quite successful. As you can see here, this was our first time clearing the dungeon. We were able to get a time of around about 220, so this is going to have a roughly the same average as the Ellunia team. If this is the dungeon you do want to farm, this team is perfectly safe. I don't really feel like you need to make any changes until later on when you move on to a speed team. Going back to the craft building section, you can now see that both of these statues are unlocked, and you definitely want to go farm out these solid rocks just so you can craft these two as soon as possible. Moving on to the last part of this video, let's go have a look at these 5-dimensional hole energies, and let's talk about where you should be spending your energy every week. For starters, when we first come into the game, and as I've talked about previously before, you get a 50% bonus EXP buff to 2Aing units. So what I do actually recommend all beginner players to do is 2A every single unit they want to use in the game, and then even consider fusing more of them as skill ups, especially for the case of Escher, who is a very, very usable unit in an RTA, and maybe some of your more favorite ones, because you aren't really going to want to use your Devilmon on them. Com2Us has also been releasing these fully skill up 2A events, so you could also just potentially wait for one of those events and skill up the ones you are going to be using the most. In 2024, I'm going to say there's pretty much only two choices on what to farm. Once you finish the 2As, you're going to be moving on to the rune, enchant, and grind farming. In my opinion, the best dungeon is still the Ellunia B5. I definitely do prefer the drops that we get from here. As you can see here, we get Despair, Endure, Nemesis, Will, and Accuracy. Despair, Nemesis, and Will are very, very useful in a lot of RTA and Siege content, so I do value these rune sets quite highly. The only other dungeon that people could potentially farm as their main base is the Khalderun dungeon. The reason being for this is this would be a swift speed chasing kind of player, if you're someone who just always wants to go first, maybe you want to do cleaving, you just want to knock everyone out in one go, this is definitely the best dungeon to farm for that purpose. However, do keep in mind that the overall sets in this aren't very good. At this present point in time, I would just avoid the Dimension Raid. I think in most cases, you are just better off farming the level 5 stage of Ellunia or Khalderun, whichever one you prefer. Before we head off, I just would like to say thank you to everyone who's been watching the YouTube series so far. It has been a lot of fun, and I'm enjoying everyone coming into my streams and asking any questions about what they can do for their own accounts. If you guys are enjoying the content, please remember to subscribe and like the video. We are trying to push to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. I'm not too sure if it's possible, but I really want to make this goal happen. That's going to be all for this one, guys. Peace out.